Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Daly. I spent 20 years with United Press International, most of it with the old UPI Radio Network. And my favorite assignment was going on the road producing and hosting American Montage. It was an hour-long weekly program. Now here's an edited version of one of those shows. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's American Montage. We are on the road again, this time in downtown Denver. It is crisp and cool here. Winter is coming on. I am standing on a rather busy street corner in the old section of Denver. In front of me is the classic Union Station, which has been restored and is being used for a variety of things. One wing of it is a TGI Fridays. But behind me, and this is why we are here, is an old 5-story storage area, a distribution center that at one time had an awful lot of food and supplies going in and out of it. Now, it is one of the nation's best-known bookstores, the Tattered Cover. The reason I'm here is my cohort, Bill Clough, said, why don't you go to Denver and do a story about the Tattered Cover, because he relies on that bookstore a lot to find books that are nearly out of print. So we are here, and we're going to talk about bookstores and how they've changed over the years on this week's American Montage. Inside this old brick building is the Tattered Covered Bookstore. Mark Miller is one of the directors of this establishment. Let's go through the bookstore with Mark and talk about how bookstores have changed over the years, how they have coffee shops in them now and electronic inventory control. Mark is a personable fellow, and I wanted to talk first about the history of this classic building that houses the Tattered Cover.
It was called the Maury Mercantile, and they had all kinds of different grocery goods. They were grocery wholesalers, and they had all different types of things, spices, coffees. They had their own brand name called Solitaire, which on some of these buildings you can still see the Solitaire brand name kind of ingrained on the buildings. And
well, just as an aside, and this has nothing to do with books, but there's something interesting. If we can walk over here, we're looking out one of the big picture windows here on the corner. The building across the street, which says Barteldes. How are they pronouncing that? Do you know?
Well, I'm not exactly sure.
It's Barteldes, Barteldes. There's an entrance at the second floor that's no longer used. Can you tell us why that's there? I found that pretty interesting.
Yes, well, actually, on that building, as well as on the second floor of our building, there was an old viaduct. It was the 16th Street Viaduct, and it used to have all the the trolley cars used to go by there. And
kind of like an L in Chicago.
Right. And until just a few years ago, actually, there were cars and buses that were using it, and those there was the entrance on the second floor of those buildings right from the viaduct.
If you've ever been to Kansas City, there's an interesting thing there downtown. They have so many railroad tracks. I think it's Grand Avenue. There's a huge bridge that crosses the area and takes a long time to get back down to ground level, and there are entrances to buildings. But if you look underneath, you see that before that overpass was built, everything was on the level with the railroad track. So they actually put the entrances are now on the second story of those buildings. Well, let's get to the matter at hand. I decided to visit here on the strength of a recommendation. One of my cohorts at UPI Radio, Bill Clough, who lived in Estes Park for a long time, fell in love with this place and said whenever he was in Denver, he came down here. How long has the Tattered Cover Bookstore been here?
Well, the Tattered Cover has been in Denver since 1971. The current owner, Joyce Meskis, bought it in 1974. It was a small shop then on 2nd Avenue, one location. It was about 950 square feet. To give you a sense of how it's grown since then.
Almost a closet compared to this place.
That's right, yeah. This our Cherry Creek location now has about 40,000 square feet of retail, and this lower downtown location has about 35,000 square feet of retail. So it's grown quite a bit over the last 22 years.
I shouldn't say this, but I'm not much of a reader myself. The phrase voracious reader doesn't apply to me. I was amazed about 10 years ago going into a bookstore in Washington, D.C., and this will really make me sound naive, at just how many titles there are. I mean, you go to a section on maps, for example, or photos, and it's not just 2 or 3 books. There are 20 or 30 that people have written on those topics.
Yes, well, it's certain. The number of titles certainly has increased. We normally stock around 175 to 200 100,000 titles. We have about 300,000 in our title base, but even with that large number, it's still a small part of what's available. There are probably over 1 million books in print in the United States alone. So it's even though a bookstore like this can hold a lot of titles, there's still a lot more that are out there.
We're talking about the way bookstores have changed and evolved. I mentioned to Matt there seemed to be a computer on every table, and that was helping, if in no other way, at least to help in the inventory.
Sure, it's the inventory control is where what we have on the computers and the inventory system, and it has made a tremendous difference in terms of the amounts of information that can give us in terms of how things are selling and how fast they're selling, and it allows any store to control its cash a little bit better because it's not on a paper system.
Let's get into a couple of areas here. We could probably spend 5 or 6 hours. Here is a section, for example, just on Colorado. A lot of it photographs. My listeners know that I'm very much into old highways. It's called Denver Streets. It's got a lot of map. My goodness, how thick that one is. The Golden Anniversary Brand Book of Denver. What kinds of readers go in for history, for example? Mm-hmm. Is it mostly people in my age bracket? Is it pretty much across the board?
Well, I think, I would say it's across the board. It's anyone who's interested in history. This particular section, Colorado or Denver history, I think is of great interest, not only to residents here, but for people passing through and go to a certain area and really want to read a little bit more about it. And Denver has this unique history. Denver and Colorado certainly has a unique history.
Now, here's something that would make me want to pick this up. This is called the seamy side of Denver.
Yes, and I think we're actually standing in what was formerly the seamy side of Denver. This was actually a red light district in these streets down here.
Good heavens! And then there's one. Here's one. Jeep trails to Colorado ghost towns.
Right. It's there are lots of old mining towns and that have been abandoned, and people like to just get into their Jeeps and take off and discover those old ghost towns.
Matt, here's a great section here. This is on puzzles, crossword puzzles. There's a old board game Clue up there. Is that an increasing part of the market, what you might call brain teasers, the whole word search kind of thing?
Well, I think there's been a consistent interest in word games. You'll see as part of this section there are books on gambling, which has increased a lot since there has been gambling that is in Colorado now. But
everybody wants to know how to beat the odds.
Right, right. But I think there's a continued interest in that, and crossword puzzles are consistently good sellers.
What has been your input that you've gotten from kids who come in here, and I want to get back to that for a second, who are discovering reading for the first time? It must be fun to just watch a child browse through and to realize that all of a sudden they found something, maybe found a book on maps or auto mechanics, and it suddenly opens up a whole area they didn't know about before.
It's still one of my favorite sites in the bookstore to walk through the children's section and see a child there sitting on a chair or sitting on the floor and looking at a book, just completely entranced by it. It's still one of the most rewarding things for me to see that connection and realize, well, that it just feels so good, and realize, well, there's someone who really is going to be one of our future readers.
Well, Matt, it's a great place, the Tattered Covered, downtown Denver in the old section, diagonally across from the restored Union Station. Thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your coming, and it's been a pleasure.
And there you have it, another edited episode of one of the American Montage programs prepared for the UPI Radio Network back in the 1980s and 90s. I'm Dennis Daly. Thanks for listening. Thanks for going with me this week. And check YouTube for more American Montage programs.